I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker. Thubten Chodron is a revered teacher and prolific author. She ordained as a nun 40 years ago and has been blazing new trails ever since. She is the founder and abbess of Sravasti Abbey, the only Tibetan Buddhist training monastery for Western nuns and monks in the United States. The monastery holds gender equality, social engagement, and care for the environment amongst its core values. Active in interfaith dialogue, Venerable Thubten Chodron also does outreach in prisons and maintains a busy schedule teaching worldwide. She emphasizes the practical application of traditional teachings to our daily lives and is especially skilled at explaining them to contemporary audiences, often with a dose of humor. Venerable Chodron has studied extensively with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and other prominent teachers. She is one of the select few to have the opportunity to co-author a book with the Dalai Lama. And now I'll turn it over to Venerable Chodron to examine how we can create habits for happiness. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't applaud yet. So, very good to be here with you. I always like to start with a little bit of sitting quietly so that we can make the transition between running around and doing something a little bit more focused with our mind. So if you can sit up straight and put your feet flat on the floor and your hands in your lap. Keep your head level and lower your eyes. And just for a moment or two, scan your body and see if there's tension anywhere. And if there is, then release that tension. Then become aware of your breath, letting your breathing pattern be whatever it is. But being aware of what it feels like as the air enters, as it leaves. Be aware of how your breath sustains your life and how it connects you to the rest of the world. So for a minute or two, just observe your breath. If you get distracted by a sound or a physical sensation or a thought, just notice that, but bring yourself home to the breath. And by letting your mind focus on one object, in this case the breath, then the mind gets quiet, or at least quieter. Let's do that for a couple of minutes. Before we begin, let's take a moment and look at our motivation. So just ask yourself, why am I here? What was the motivation for coming to the talk today? So there's no right or wrong, just check what your motivation was. And whatever our initial motivation was, let's build on it by thinking that we will listen and share together so that we can learn to identify our weaknesses and faults and remedy them, so we can identify and enhance our good qualities. And let's do this not simply for our own personal benefit, but realizing that we're interrelated to all living beings, and that what we do has an effect on the lives of others. Then let's cultivate a motivation of compassion and the wish to be of benefit to all living beings through sharing this time together today and learning whatever we're able to learn. And then slowly open your eyes. So I always like to start things off with checking the motivation and consciously generating a good motivation, because from a Buddhist viewpoint, our motivation is the key element in the value of what we're doing. So this is quite opposite to how general society evaluates things. Yeah, usually in society, we think if somebody gets a lot of praise, if they are famous, something like that, that then they are successful and what they're doing is very good. But from a Buddhist viewpoint, that's not the criteria we use. Yeah. Instead of what you do, it's why we do it. Because any action in itself can be done with a variety of motivations. Okay? We can sit here with a very self-centered motivation. We can sit here with a very altruistic motivation. Outside to the world, the action looks the same, but due to the difference in mental state, the long-term results of the actions are very, very different. So I always like to give the example here of, what we consider generosity in the world. So if, let's say, there's somebody who is raising money to build a clinic in an impoverished area of the world, and there's one person who writes out a check for $1 million for the clinic, and their thought is, I'm giving $1 million, and when they build this clinic, they're going to have my name in the foyer. And then everybody will know how rich I am and how generous I am. Yeah, and they give their $1 million, and everybody says, oh, this person's so wonderful, they're so generous, they're so fantastic. This gets written up in the newspaper. Then there's some other person who doesn't have so much money. They give $20, but their thought is, may every single person who goes to that clinic be cured from whatever ailments they have, and may they abide in good health and with a peaceful mind. And he gives $20 with that motivation. Nobody notices, nobody comments, only that person knows his motivation. Which one do we, in society in general, do we call the generous person? The person who gave $1 million. Was his motivation generous? Yeah? Did he have a generous motivation? The motivation completely self-centered. He didn't care beans about anybody receiving medical care or anybody being ill. He just cared about his own name being, written up in the foyer and in the newspapers. So the real generous person was the person who gave $20 that nobody actually knows about, because that's the person who from their heart had a generous motivation. And in the long term, when we talk about the karmic effects of our actions, the long-term effects of our actions, it's the person who gave $20 with a really generous motivation who's going to receive good results. The other person who gave $1 million, it's nice he gave $1 million, but in terms of the real lasting effect of that action, not so much. Okay? So from a Buddhist perspective, we're always asked to look at what our motivation is. And so often we have no clue what our motivation is. Yeah, we just do things. There's always a motivation. There's always an intention, because our mouth doesn't move, our body doesn't move without an intention happening in the mind first. But we're so often totally spaced out on what our intentions actually are. And so we live on automatic most of the time. Yeah? Meaning that there's an impulse that comes in our mind. We don't stop and notice the impulse. We don't evaluate whether the impulse is something really beneficial for other living beings or for ourselves in the long term, or whether it's self-centered. We don't evaluate our intention. Just the thought comes, we do it. Yeah? And so, looking at it this way, we're not really fully alive, are we? Yeah? Because we're not making conscious choices about how to use our energy. And we're not steering our mind in a wholesome direction, in a virtuous direction. We're just acting out impulses, much like cats and dogs do. And this, what I'm going to say now, may sound very shocking. But if you check, in a way, it's very true. Because in some ways, we human beings are not much better than animals. And in some ways, we're actually worse. Yeah. Animals help their friends and harm their enemies. Yeah? You have a dog. Your dog loves you because you feed him and take him outside to run. Yeah? And he protects you. He barks at any strangers who might want to harm you. Yeah? So from the dog's perspective, helping his friends, which happens to be you, harming the enemies, barking at them, any other person. Okay? Human beings, we do the same thing, don't we? Somebody's a friend, we give them presents, we praise them. we do favors for them. Somebody's an enemy, and we trash them. Yeah. The difference is that we human beings know how to inflict more harm than animals do. That's the sad part of the whole thing. Yeah. Animals only kill when they're threatened or they're hungry. Human beings kill for who knows what reason. You know, it's pretty crazy now, isn't it? Yeah? Dogs bark when there's a reason for it. You look at what's going on in the presidential election and the speech that's happening. Do people think about what they're saying? Do they think about the long-term effects on other living beings and on this country and on the world? No. Just the impulse comes in and the garbage, thank you, comes out. Okay? So if we're going to be somehow better than animals, we need to have this self-reflexive quality, what we call introspective awareness, which is aware of what we are thinking, what we are feeling, what we are saying and why we're saying it. What are we doing and why are we doing it? And I think that is what can start to make us different than animals, is having that ability and then applying reason and wisdom to that ability so that we can differentiate rotten motivations from beneficial motivations. Yeah? And then cultivate the beneficial ones, subdue the rotten ones, instead of just living on automatic. So I think that's what real spiritual practice is all about. As His Holiness Dalai Lama says, he says, my religion is kindness. Yeah. He doesn't say my religion is, the Four Noble Truths, and the first Noble Truth has 3 categories, and the second Noble Truth has this many, and the third this many, and the fourth this many, and all the philosophy. The philosophy in Buddhism is stupendous. Really, it's unbelievable. But what he says is, my religion is kindness, because it comes down to how we live our lives. What kind of human being are we? Do we create more problems in our life than we solve? Or do we solve more problems and benefit more people than we create? And that, I think, is the real, what really gives meaning and purpose to our lives. Yeah. And so, excuse me if I offend you for a minute. But all the hardware and software and things in the clouds and algorithms. I just learned what an algorithm was today. Yeah. All this kind of stuff, when you die, is that going to mean anything to you? What's going to mean something to you when you die? Yeah. When you look back on your life, yeah, how are you going to feel about having lived? I've never been with one person or heard of one person who's dying who says, I should have worked more overtime. Yeah, never. I think what really gives meaning and purpose in our lives is how we connect with real live human beings and the extent to which we can open our heart in kindness towards other living beings. because the people that I see, you know, have you ever noticed how as people age, they bend over? Yeah? And I think it's not just that our body is getting weaker, but I think when we store a lot of actions created by rotten motivations, when we store those in our mind, it weighs us down. You know, if we go through life and we get more and more bitter over what people did to us, or more and more jealous of people who were better than us, or feel unappreciated, or, you know, taken advantage of, or whatever, the more we store those kinds of emotions, I think the more bent over we get. Yeah? And so I think it's quite important in our life to be on top of what's going on in our own mind. Yeah? And so that at night, when we go to bed, we feel at peace with ourselves. That doesn't mean we have to be perfect. We are anywhere but perfect beings, okay? But to be able to, as much as possible, go through life with a good motivation, you know, that's realistic, and to check how much we're fulfilling our motivation during the day, to remedy it when we mess up, and we will mess up, and then to pick ourselves up and continue on with a lot of joy. And I think that is really what gives meaning and purpose to our lives, and what at the end of the day is going to enable us to die and feel peaceful and feel prepared for our death. And die we will. Die is the only thing we have to do. Everything else is really optional. Isn't it? You know, people say, I have to go to work. You know, I have to pick my kids up. I have to meet this deadline. We don't have to do any of those things. We are choosing to do them. And I think we need to acknowledge we are choosing those things. And then to really look at, you know, if we own it, that's our choice, then to, you know, then to be responsible for our choices. Yeah. But, you know, we actually have more choice than we feel we do. You know, some people say, I have to go to work, otherwise my family can't survive. No, you're choosing to go to work. And you're choosing to live a certain lifestyle and make a certain amount of money to give your children and your family certain material things. Yeah, it's possible to choose differently. Yeah, if you have different values, then maybe your first choice isn't that your kids have every single thing that their friends have. Yeah? Maybe you have different choices in life about what success means, what meaning is. And so, you know, you live by your own values, you live by your own choices, you know, as much as you can, given the situation that you're in. But my point is that it's not the external situation that imprisons us. It's our own internal ignorance, anger, and clinging attachment. That's what really imprisons us. It's our own arrogance and our own jealousy, our own self-centeredness that imprison us. It's not the rest of the world. Because if our happiness and suffering depended on the external environment, then there's no way really to ever feel fulfilled or happy, because there's no way we're going to control everyone and everything in our external environment. Yeah, we try to, But none of us are successful in doing that. Yeah? The only thing we can ever really control or manage is what's happening in here. And this is often what we neglect, what we're out of touch with. And so that's why I think we need to look, what's going on in here? So I know a lot of you are, or at least I heard a lot of you are interested in mindfulness practice and mindfulness meditation. And I think that's quite good, because it helps to settle the mind. It helps you to become more aware of what actually is going on in the mind, what our motivations are, what we're thinking and feeling, what's happening in our body. But I think just the bare attention, mindfulness in the sense of bare attention to what your experience is, I don't think that's sufficient. Because I can sit here and be mindful of, I'm mindful of how mad I am at that person who criticized me. And I'm mindful of opening my mouth and insulting him back. And I'm mindful of how satisfied I feel by getting revenge. Yeah? Mindfulness? Is that any help to you in your life? Is that going to make you more content? Is that going to make, look at that. That's just, I'm mindful of my rotten actions and my rotten motivation. That's not going to get us anywhere spiritually. Okay, that's not going to make us any happier. Yeah. So the thing is, if, okay, I'm angry, then pause. Yeah, I'm angry. That means I'm not going to speak right now. Because if I speak out of anger, I'm going to hurt somebody else. I'm going to probably make the situation worse and bring more problems to myself. And in the long term, I'll just be imprinting more and more anger in my own consciousness, and that's not going to do me any good or do anyone else any good. So I'm angry. Okay, pause. Now what do I do? Well, telling ourselves we shouldn't be angry doesn't really work. Yeah, we're angry. Yeah, the thing is, we have to say, do I want to increase my anger? Do I want to decrease it? Yeah, if I want to decrease it, then I need to apply an antidote to it. I need to learn to look at the situation from a different perspective so that the anger dissipates by itself. So it's not an issue of suppressing the anger and pushing it down and ignoring it and painting a nice sweet smile on our face. That's not the issue. The issue is looking at, why am I angry? Okay? And so when I have these kind of internal conversations with myself when I'm angry. Okay, I notice I'm angry. And then I say to myself, why are you angry? Well, so-and-so did, and then they said this, and that's going to hurt me. And then I say, the other part says, yeah, they did that, they said that, why are you angry? Well, they. Yeah, they may have done that, why are you angry? And then I keep on asking myself, why am I angry? Why am I angry? And I get beyond blaming the other person. Because I see, yes, they did whatever they did. But why did I get angry when they did that? That's the question. Why did I get angry? It's not that anger is the only possible emotion I could feel in this situation. It's not the case that any sane person would automatically feel angry. This is what we think and how we justify our anger. But that's not really what's happening. Yeah, why am I angry? Why am I upset when they look at me and say, Chodron, you didn't meet the deadline and you weren't a team player and you really flaked off on the project? Why do I get upset when they look at me and say my name and say that? Whereas when they look at that person over there, say the exact same thing and use his name, I don't get upset. Why? Why am I angry? It's not because of what they're saying and doing, because they say it to that person and I don't get upset. Yeah? Why do I get upset? Me. It's about me. Yeah. Why do I get upset when I'm criticized? Because what I'm really thinking, we're among friends, I can be honest, is I'm the most important person in the world. So what this person says to me is the most important thing that happens in the world. What this person says to that person over there is not so important. If it's my friend, I say, chill out, that person's just dumping, they're just venting. You don't need to get, knocked off course because of it. If that person's somebody I don't like, that I'm competing with, and somebody insults him, I'm going right on. Okay. What kind of person does that make me? Yeah. It's only important if it concerns me. And if I'm insulted, this is much more important than the bombing of Aleppo and those people caught in that horrible situation. The fact that I got insulted is number one no-no in this world. And I have to, act on it now. We cannot have this exist. Aleppo, well, let it happen. That's not so important. It doesn't happen to me. But what happens to me is so important. Is this reasonable? Is this intelligent? Are we intelligent human beings when we think like this? Huh? I'm including myself in all this, believe me. But I often look and I go, Chodron, why? Why do you think you're the center of the universe? Yeah? There's over 7 billion human beings on this planet. And one of them is the most important one. And that just happens to be me. Why? Is that reasonable? Yeah. We believe in democracy. Or at least most people in this country believe in democracy. I'm not sure what's happening now. But we believe in democracy. So whose happiness is more important? 7 billion minus 1 or 1? Other living beings' happiness is actually more important than mine, if we're democratic. So if that's the case, and other living beings want to be happy and don't want to suffer with as much fervor as I want to be happy and don't want to suffer, then doesn't it make more sense to work for the benefit of all living beings instead of just for my own benefit? Isn't that more reasonable? Isn't it more logical? Isn't it more beneficial? And at the end of the day, having a compassionate attitude towards others and altruistic intention in what we do, isn't that going to actually be more satisfying for us internally, ourselves. You know, at the end of the day, what we feel inside, regardless of what the world says about us. Okay? So I think we need to really look at this thing of intention. Yeah? And check our intentions. Learn how to cultivate wise and beneficial intentions that bring more people in. You know? Because we live in a world where we're completely interrelated. I think you people know that more than anything. You know? You're connected all over the place. Yeah? But we have to be connected in our hearts to all those people, not just connected in the cloud or connected by wires. We have to have a heart connection with them and really have an intention to be of benefit. Okay. So that doesn't mean that we all need to be Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama. Yeah. But because Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama do not work in Google. And they aren't your family members. Yeah, but you are. You work here. And you live with your family. So we each have, you know, the people around us who we are able to influence the most. And we can start out with an intention, a broad intention, long-term intention, to be of the greatest benefit to all living beings. And then, what did they say? Think globally, work locally. So global altruism. And then in our own lives, whoever is in front of our face at that particular moment is the object through which we practice compassion and generate altruism. Okay? And so in that way, yeah, we'd stay on top of our motivation, always coming back and checking it, and trying to act as much as possible as we can with a kind motivation to whoever happens to be with us. Whether it's the car in front of you who just cut you off on the highway. Yeah. Yeah. We have to cultivate compassion instead of road rage. So whoever it is, you know, that car who just cut us off, you know, the person who is in the line ahead of us in the supermarket, you know, your boss, the dog, your neighbor's dog who poops on your lawn. Yeah. To consciously cultivate an attitude of compassion for all these living beings. Yeah, because we're related to all of them. And they've all been kind to us in one way or another, in this life or other lifetimes. You know? And we have to live in a world where we want to live in a world where we're surrounded by people who are happy. Yeah. So we have to have a motivation to benefit them in order for them to be happy. You know, His Holiness Dalai Lama says, if you want to be selfish, at least be wisely selfish and benefit other people. Because if we benefit other people, then we live in a society where other people are happy. If we don't benefit others, if we're only looking out for ourselves, we're going to live in a society with a lot of unhappy people, and that's going to affect us. Yeah? I mean, we know it, don't we? If you go home and one person in your family is unhappy, the whole family feels the vibe. So at least if we can be one person who is happy, one person who is kind to the people around us, then we contribute to the benefit of this planet. Yeah. Then we have to learn the techniques of how to make our mind happy, how to be kind. We can't just say be kind. Okay? And this is what I think is so stupendous in Buddhist philosophy, is the Buddha really, he was so practical, incredibly practical. And the Indian pandits who followed from the Buddha, so practical in terms of teaching us how to direct our thoughts, how to conceptualize different events in our life, so that instead of getting angry, we can feel compassion in that same situation. So that instead of being jealous, we can rejoice in other people's good qualities. So that instead of being stingy and miserly, we can automatically be generous. So these techniques, how to train the mind, it's called mind training. And the book that was out there, Good Karma, How to Create the Causes of Happiness and Avoid the Causes of Suffering, that contains many of the methods for how to do that. And another book, Working with Anger, also, if you have a problem with anger, most of us do, even though we think we don't. Yeah. I didn't think I had a problem with anger until my teacher sent me to work in an Italian Dharma center with macho Italian men. That was an interesting experience. I learned that I had a big problem with anger. There. So, to learn these different techniques and then practice them on a daily basis, practice looking at a situation from a different perspective on a daily basis to train the mind to see things differently. And then in that way we are transforming our motivation, and we are also affecting our emotions and our experience. Okay? So unfortunately, I don't have time to give you all those techniques. I'm just trying to suggest some books. His Holiness Dalai Lama books, all of them are a very good place to start. Yeah. But it's a practice. Yeah. Mind training. Okay. So we have about 10 minutes. We can do some questions and maybe answers or comments. Yeah, however you want to direct it.
Okay, I have a mic here, so if anybody has a question.
Mm-hmm.
First, thank you for your wonderful talk. So I guess everyone in this room probably already knows something about how to control your emotions, how to have a good motivation. But but people outside of this room, probably in the world, they have a lot of problems with their emotions. Like, for example, in the U.S., there are a lot of tensions between the ethnic groups. A lot of people are killed for different reasons. So do you have any suggestions how we can solve those problems? Thank you.
Okay. So how we can help the broader society, with the emotions and so on. I think we have to start with ourselves. Yeah? We really do. And if, I don't know about you, but I know within myself, I'm not peaceful and calm all the time. I'm not free of the emotions that we see, in the media in the U.S. right now, or just even in our own neighborhoods that we see the bigotry and racism and discrimination and so forth, the income inequality. So I don't really have the confidence to say I've got it together and those people are all somehow they're the unaware ones, because I know that if you put me in a certain situation, I might act like them. As long as I have the seeds of anger and greed and ignorance and arrogance and jealousy in me, you put me in a different situation, I could act very differently. So I look at it as I have to work with myself and free myself of those seeds of the emotions as well as their manifest form. And through the ripple effect, that goes out. And I think also the more in tune we are with our own emotions, and the more we want to and can learn about good communication with other people. And here I recommend nonviolent communication. It's a system developed by Marshall Rosenberg. Really very, very good, that helps us identify our own feelings and needs, as well as identify others' feelings and needs, and have empathy for ourselves as well as for others, and have compassion, and then learn skillful ways to be able to communicate with people. Yeah? Because when these things go on in society, we can't just turn our face and say, it doesn't concern me. Because it does concern us. It concerns all of us. We may be the person that's being discriminated against. We may be the person watching a friend discriminating against someone. We may be the person who looks in our own heart and sees bigotry in ourselves, too. Yeah? So we have to learn how to communicate in a wise, compassionate manner, yeah, so we can work on our own mind and remedy these attitudes in ourselves, and so that with compassion we can say something to others. Yeah, if we scream and shout at them, it really doesn't do much good. Yeah, it just makes them angry. Yeah, but if we say to somebody, somebody, let's say, who's being quite racist, if we say, do you feel threatened? They may say, yes, I feel threatened. And then we can explore that feeling of being threatened with them. And we can also say, what is it you really need right now? Not try and convince them that the other person isn't threatening, but say, what do you need right now? And maybe they say, I need safety. What kind of safety do you need? They may say, I need physical safety, or I need emotional safety, or I need to feel like I'm a worthwhile person. And then from there you can start more of a dialogue about, okay, you need to feel like you're a worthwhile person. How do you think you can help yourself to feel more worthwhile? So that, you're not so threatened. You don't feel so threatened. And then help that person, and help ourselves do some brainstorming about what we can do to help meet our own needs. Instead of saying, my needs aren't being met and it's your fault. Because like I said, we can't change anybody else. We can only change here. So how can I help fulfill my own needs? Without making demands of the world that the world can't fulfill.
Other questions?
So I know anger is an issue, but in this country in particular, there is a potentiator. Like
Could you hold the microphone
Oh,
closer?
sorry. Yes, so anger is an issue, but in this country, there is a potentiator. Like everybody has guns. What do you think about gun control?
So you're asking me personally what I think about gun control. I think we need it. I think we need it very, very, very much for a safe society. Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. I live in a part of the country where people have a lot of guns and where they don't want gun control. And I remember once talking with a 15-year-old boy there, and he just was repeating the thing of, you know, guns don't kill people, people do. And then I said, well, then why do we give the military guns? Why don't we give them forks or napkins? If guns aren't the thing that kill people. Yeah. And I don't think our founding ancestors had in mind widespread an armed populace. I think it's also dangerous for the police and dangerous for everybody. Yeah. And more people there's more death by suicide with guns than there is homicide with guns. So it's actually a public health hazard, both for people themselves and for whoever it is. I could go on and on. You can get me on a soapbox. I'm trying to restrain myself. Yeah. Maybe there's another question.
I have a question myself. The events of the election have been kind of disturbing and agitating to my mind, and very much the opposite of uplifting in terms of the experience. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for just navigating the weeks ahead and trying to deal with it?
Okay. Yeah, so I think most of us probably are quite agitated and upset about what's happening in the country right now and the feeling before the election. And it's not, no matter who wins, it's not like it's going to radically change after the election either, unfortunately. And so this relates back to your question about what we can do. And for me personally, this is why I'm talking. You know, this is why I give talks in different places, to try and share good values with other people. Because I think when we can get ourselves rooted in good values, and one of our good values is an attitude of kindness and an attitude of fortitude in the face of harm and suffering, the more we can create those values, those emotions in ourselves, then the more we'll be able to navigate what is coming ahead and remain steadier ourselves and be of more benefit to the rest of society. Yeah. So I think everybody needs to vote, and I think we need to speak out. But we need to speak out with wisdom and kindness, not out of anger, not with violence. You know? And we need to speak out for the benefit of the people that we're talking to, and for the benefit of the entire society. We're not speaking out because we need to vent our anger and frustration. We're speaking out because we care about the world, you know? And I think this message of my religion is kindness, and we are all interdependent, and we affect each other, and we depend on each other to stay alive. I think this message is very, very powerful. And the more we really feel that inside, the more we feel that we have to include everybody in a conversation. And we have to get over this us versus them. You know? Other people can be involved in us versus them, but that doesn't mean I need to be. I can put the them with the us so that there's only us. Yeah. Are you getting what I'm saying? You know? Instead of, okay, I'm here with all the rational, clear-thinking, kind people, and then there's those people out there that I can't stand who are bigots. You know? It's, no, all of us are part of living beings who just want to be happy and not suffer. We're all trying to live in this world in harmony in one way or another and get our needs met. Yeah. So can I relate to those people who are acting in ways and speaking in ways that normally just rattle me to the core? Can I speak to them and include them in us instead of seeing them as them? Yeah. Can I look at them and look inside their heart and see that they are not an inherently hateful, despicable person? They are a person who's suffering. You know, why is somebody spouting so much hatred? It's not because they're happy inside. If you're happy inside, you don't spout hatred and stir up conflict. You know, we all know that. When you feel good about yourself and you feel happy inside, you don't wake up in the morning and say, I think I'm going to accuse somebody and stir the whole country up. You know? So that person has tremendous suffering in that heart. Every single person that we look at, you know, who has values we don't agree with or is behaving in ways that we think is harmful, they're only doing that because they're trying to be happy and they're very confused about what the causes of happiness are and what the causes of suffering are. Yeah. So isn't that person an object of compassion, not an object of hatred? Yeah. So to be able to approach those people with an attitude of compassion, and compassion doesn't mean that we pity people and we look down on them. Oh, you poor bigot. No, that's not compassion. That's condescension and our own bigotry. So this is why it really needs a lot of mind training. You know, how can I look at that person and look in their heart and see their suffering and care about them? Yeah? And find some way so that we can communicate. At least in some small way we can connect as one human being to another human being. And if we can do that in some small way, then slowly we can build on that and make it bigger and bigger. Okay? It's a slow process. It's not a click and you have it in your screen process. Because it involves changing our mind, which is much harder than reprogramming a computer. Which is already difficult enough.
Well, thank you, Venerable Chodron, for your talk today and the insight and sharing with us your advice.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
And I welcome you all, you know, when you want to get out of Silicon Valley, to come to the middle of nowhere. We have a monastery in eastern Washington State, totally in the middle of nowhere, beautiful, very kind people, and you're all welcome to come and visit us at some time.
And Venerable Chodron is teaching in the Bay Area if you're interested in exploring topics further. She has a one-day retreat coming up next Sunday. And if anyone's interested in joining us for lunch, we'll have lunch right after this. If you do want to get a copy of the book signed, Venerable Chodron is here to do that for you. And thank you again, everyone.